What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Sports Science Podcast. I'm David, PhD student at Loughborough University.
And I'm Matt, head strength and conditioning coach within rugby. David, what are we doing here?
Yeah, well, for anyone new, we're just sharing the highs and lows of our journey as early sports science practitioners.
And learning from all the experiences and perspectives of our guests to help us grow in our current roles and careers.
That's right. So, hey, if that sounds like you and if it's up your alley, we'd love for you to come alongside and learn with us.
So whether or for the first time or not, welcome to the RSS podcast.
Let's go. That's good. Welcome back. We're in. Oh, that intro was tough. We're trying something different with the intro, aren't we, Matt?
Yeah, we definitely are.
And that was difficult.
My mic's all wet.
I mean, that was one take, but it was like 15.
One take. Too easy. Too easy.
And if you're listening to this on Spotify, you didn't see Matt slap himself in the face
Or eat the mic.
15 times.
So we're all good.
Or eat the mic. Forget his mic. We move.
So, what's the purpose of today's podcast in reality? What is the purpose?
Well, number 3 in our series 1, episode 3.
Sorry, my cover actually smells really nice considering the places it's been in. I mean, like my bags and like cars and all of that stuff. It does smell nice. I went up to it. It does smell pretty nice. It smells like perfume.
You need to stop going for a run. You went for a run before the podcast and you're fried.
That's my winter training, mate. And so far, let's just say, self-efficacy was low.
Oh, but you did it. And did it affect performance? That's a question.
I think it did.
No, series 1 of wintering. Last week we had Kate Rooney on, former Denison, which was unbelievable. I've had some good reviews about that one, mostly athletes, some other coaches who've listened to it. And I'm like, listen, we can't take any credit for it really because it was just all her. But that was amazing. Like, what did you think about it last week?
I mean, it was quite interesting to see her side of things and how her views contrasted from an athlete to a coach now. Before she was just, I don't know, it was just interesting to see how she thought about it from those two different perspectives.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. It's interesting, like, she said as an athlete, she just like kind of went along with what was going on and didn't put too much thought into why. And so I guess now as a coach, she, I guess, is able to maybe understand those athletes who also don't go along or just kind of go along with it. I don't know. It was interesting to hear. Plus, it's just amazing to get someone with so much experience on the podcast.
Especially all the training that she's done, like what sort of training she was doing as an athlete to now what sort of training she's prescribing the athletes. And also just highlighting the fact how she also witnessed how her body changed during those winter months, during that off-season period where she was actually gaining mass, but it wasn't bad mass. It was good mass through all the training that she could do without the stresses of competition or the heavy training schedule of when you're in competition phase. During that off season where you can purely focus on raising and increasing those physiological attributes that you wish to develop. So it was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So we thought,
and if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it because it's incredible, and we'd love to know what you think. So if you haven't listened to it, definitely go listen to it. Let us know. Go follow us on Instagram or YouTube. RSS podcast, I think, is the handle on both of those, or just search Real Sports Science Podcast. Yeah, we'd love to hear what you thought of it, either on a comment or slide into our DMs.
But yeah, no, and this next format we've got an upcoming guest, but we thought we'd like to split it now and see what the research says before speaking to our next. Now we'd like to just cut this series in half right now, and just before we get into our next two guests, we'd like to just see what the research says, and see what's out there and see if it changes our thoughts and see if we can learn anything from it.
Yeah, because we're nerds at the end of the day, so we like to. Well, I guess I was actually thinking, like, is there much like research on wintering? Because it's a pretty broad, like, how my thought was like, okay, let's go find some research on wintering or off season training, and I kind of struggled to think of like, what do I even type in,
Mm. It
right? So I tried like typing in off season training research, and most of what I got was like Tim Gabbett stuff of like train hard or train smart, or like should you train hard and smart, which I think we've talked about in an episode a while ago. What episode was
I'm
that?
not
Maybe
sure,
we'll
but it
get
was
back to you on that one.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get back. But I was like, oh, like where? I don't know. Did you try also to like, or did you have
I
difficulties
think
finding research on?
I think the issue is wintering's got such a broad term. It is such a broad term that it covers a lot of topics that can fit into that. Because wintering, what are we looking for?
Yeah.
What is wintering? We're looking for a program or a part of an off season where we can either recuperate, so there's tons of papers on recovery, or we can, whether
Mm,
that's sleep, recovery is even a broad term, so what else are we looking
yeah.
for? We're looking at, gaining strength gains, hypertrophic gains. So that's an even bigger broad term. So I genuinely think that wintering slash off-season training is essentially a massive umbrella term that has got everything inside. So I feel like in its
Yeah.
simplest form, it's just a time where your season's less congested, where you've got a break to either, depending on how you're feeling, rest or to get that mahi, get that work. So it's yeah, put scientifically,
Yes. What was that word that you said?
mahi, hard work,
What's that?
hard work means hard. It means hard work.
In what language is that hard work? You're just not going to answer me what language that is? Just silence on your end. Just radio silence from Matt. Oh, he's Googling
Maori,
it.
Maori,
Oh, you said it wrong.
Maori.
Maori.
It's
But what language? You still haven't told me what language it
that's
is.
Maori, Hiwi, New Zealand. The native
Oh,
people,
I thought you were
Maori.
saying the word again.
Oh,
Wow. That's embarrassing. That's my bad.
anyways, Da-
No, but
David, back to the research.
please hold while Matt puts on a blazer.
Back to the research.
Feeling smart already.
David, what is self-efficacy? I don't smoke, but I'd love to have a pipe right now.
That's funny. Uh, well, yeah, that's a good point. It's like a huge. It's too big to maybe have research on it directly, but there'd be so many things that fall under winter training that maybe you would research to help winter training. Yeah, so one that I came across, which I've been reading, is is a study on examining athletes' self-efficacy and during strength training, and the effort that they give, or the perceived effort, not only from them, which is interesting, but also their coach during an entire off season. So basically, like, how does efficacy change during an off season, and does it influence the effort that an athlete gives during an S&C session?
Session. He said session. um, yeah, and
Yeah, so
when you sent this paper to me, I was actually quite intrigued because, yes, I'm already using big words, eh? This coat's doing me wonders. I was actually intrigued, David Holmes, um, that I was actually intrigued because I thought it's not looking at a certain sessions, like maybe one or two sessions. It's looking at the whole off-season period, which actually you can
yeah,
see more because you can if we're only testing for one session, it's easy to get up for that one session or not get up for that session. What's
right,
interesting is the fluctuations
yeah,
that you may see. Whether is it going to be the start, because as you over 21 days you build a habit, so maybe the start's going to be crap, but like maybe you'll see the self-efficacy rise towards the end of it, or does it happen
mm,
towards the end when they get bored and they can't just carry on? So it was interesting. Those are my
yeah,
thoughts.
yeah. So basically, these papers. I mean, it's very sports psych, which I'm not a sports psych. So these papers are sometimes a tough read because I'm just not used to reading them, and they use big words that neuromuscular physiologists just don't have in their vocabulary. And they're talking about what tests they're doing
Yeah.
and stuff, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is. So it's good. Puts me outside of what I know. But so and it also just teaches me big words and what they mean, like self-efficacy, which I think like a lot of people, me included, would hear self-efficacy and be like, oh yeah, I know what that means. But if anyone ever asked me before having this paper in front of me, like, what is the definition of self-efficacy, I wouldn't be able to just rattle it off.
No, a genuine
You know what I mean?
self-efficacy to me is one's self-perceived, or like it's one's uh, motivation. That like I couldn't. Do you know what I mean? Like I just say, oh, it's
Yeah,
one's
so I would
motivation
do
to
the
do a
exact same
task.
thing. I'd be like, yeah, right. Like I'd probably not get far off it, but I wouldn't be
Hmm.
able to be like, bam, here is a well-rounded definition.
So what?
So this
Yeah,
paper defines it as the belief in one's capabilities to organize and execute the course of action required to produce given attainments.
I preferred
So
my one.
basically, how confident are you? Yeah, me too. Me too. Cut right to the chase. Basically, how confident are you in your ability to get whatever it is you need to get done? Yeah,
Hmm.
is that
Yeah,
good?
no, 100%.
And then basically they say self-efficacy is theorized, and I'm reading directly off the paper now, so these aren't my words. To be formulated from, so four sources: mastery or mastery experience, so you've done it a ton of times, so you know you can do it; vicarious experiences, or viewing another individual succeeding or failing, so just watching people and you're like, okay, I can do that because they can do it, or maybe it's like, oh, I see them how they've done it and they failed, so I know I don't do it like that. Social persuasion, which I think is a really interesting one, or being told by a significant other that you have the ability to be successful. I think that's really interesting. And then physiological state, or interpreting the body's physiological reaction or state as being either positive or negative, which is also a really interesting one in like the areas that I interact with athletes. Do any of those like kind of jump out at you? Because those last two kind of really jump out at me, and as I've been thinking about it over the last couple of days, of like how even like I can use that knowledge.
Well, I feel like the see it in rugby, like the vicarious experiences of viewing another individual succeeding or failing. I'd say my past experience is not now as much, but like in the past when two rugby teams, so the first team will get selected for the Saturday, and the people will see that the people that don't get selected for that weekend still have to play like run defense for the team that's going to play as a nice little warm up. And
Hmm.
some people react in a way where, okay, like I'm happy for the bloke, I want to make them train hard so then they can get it right on the weekend. Whereas other people will react negatively, um, and like as it says, like what viewing another individual succeeding or failing, they'll see them as succeeding, they'll react and think, okay, I'm going to carve out this bloke, not in a positive way, if you get me, to try and injure him so that he can get through.
Hmm.
And then the other one was social persuasion.
Savage.
Being in the environment that I work in, whenever asking in an athletic development session with the youth athletes, whenever giving them good feedback, you don't have to be too strict on when to give good feedback, but it is a skill to identify when to reassure an athlete or when to push them a bit harder, a youth athlete, which is something by no means I have not mastered. But yeah, I have noticed a couple of those in different. I have experienced those in different scenarios or instances. So it is
Hmm.
quite interesting to see how that makes up self-efficacy and how that can influence an athlete going through something or given a task.
Yeah. 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 So basically, like this study. Um, so yeah, they had a bunch of definition, but what they were interested again is like, how does self-efficacy one change during an off season, And then is there like a relationship between a change of self-efficacy and then performance, but not only performance, also like effort. It's like what you're saying, like if my self-efficacy is down for whatever reason, say like I didn't get selected for a team,
Mm.
does my training decrease or does it increase? Like what, I get, like they gave an example here, like if my self-efficacy is super high because I know that I can do this task, am I going to try as hard to do it because I'm like almost overconfident in my abilities? Whereas like maybe I got that self-efficacy because I was training really hard and I was really working really hard to be able to get that performance that gave me that self-efficacy in the
Yeah.
first place. So I thought that was really interesting. Or and then on the other hand, is low efficacy gonna cause me to put more effort in because I want to get better at this task? Bit of a minefield.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So one interesting thing that they found in this one is um, they they found that over the course, like you said, it's interesting because they followed these. I think there's 99 athletes. Followed them for in 4 sports. Yeah, 99 athletes in Division One in the States in 4 different sports, about 20 years old, and they measured in 4 distinct time points during the off season, as well as the strength and conditioning coaches also rated each
Mm.
individual's effort at each time point. So it wasn't only
Which is
like
good.
at each yeah, with each time point the athlete was like, I think I tried this hard. The coach was like, I think they tried that hard. And then they averaged those two numbers to give them like an effort scale, which is also very interesting. I haven't seen that
But
before.
I don't know. I quite
Um,
like that as a way to measure it. Um, but then you are dealing with conflicts of interest, I guess.
I think it's good, yeah, because it gives it from a subjective and an
Mm.
objective point of view
Yeah.
as well.
Both at the
You
same
know,
time. Yeah. Um,
yeah, and they actually found that in this case, over a full season, self-efficacy didn't have a significant impact on effort, which is interesting. I thought they would show the different, but maybe it's because like, I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that. Firstly, what they found. So they found, yeah, that effort or that self-efficacy didn't have a significant impact on self-efficacy, on effort. Wow, talking in circles. But what I did think was interesting that over the course of the season, uh, effort went down over the course of um, an off season. So over the course, so they perceived, and the coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, perceived them working harder at the beginning of the off season or on that first session than they perceived themselves and others working at the last session, which I thought was interesting. And they mentioned this as well, but I don't know if it's like what you said, like they just got used to kind of the environment that they were in. Like in that first session, it's like the first session, maybe they don't know that strength and conditioning coaches as much. It's like, hey, we like everyone's fired up. We got to give 100% effort. But then over the course of a season or those 4 testings, like distinct time points when they tested, um, it's like, okay, I'm used to this. Like I'm not as almost like scared, not scared. That's not the right word, but like I have all this motivation because it's in a new environment. Do you think like that's a plausible thing,
I think
or
so.
that
I
happens?
think it's also, like, I mean, how many times, say, we'll use this in a term or in an example that we've both done before. When you go for a run and you're in a new environment, or you go for a run and you've done this run 2 or 3 times, and you're like, okay, I know the course now. I know where I start gassing out. I'm going to hit that point and I'm going to stride and I'm going to get better. Once you've done that run 11th time, you're like, okay, and you sort of see a plateau. You can either go one or two ways. Hey, so I wonder if they hit a plateau in a certain point and they were like, I'm
Mm.
comfortable in my environment. I know that all the ins and outs. I know what I'm in for. It's not a surprise. I don't have to impress him. I don't have to impress anyone. I know how to ride it, because I'm sure you've done this. You know, when you're hitting, you find cheat codes as an athlete, or as someone involved in the sport. You find cheat codes once you're used to something. Don't have to, because there's only one person that loves hard work, and that's David Goggins, in my opinion, right? But and that's 24/7.
Who's gonna lift the
Yeah, you know
boats?
what I mean? And that's 24/7. But everyone else, there's your brain automatically does it in a way that you're like, why would I want to try gas out or use as much energy? It's a natural instinct to find the cheat code.
Yeah,
Primals, I'm sure they were like not trying to, okay, how can I work the hardest to get my food? No, how can I easily get food? You know, so everyone tries to fight cheat
yeah.
codes. So I wonder if
With
they did that
expending like the
least
least
amount of
amount of
energy. Yeah,
energy.
so I wonder if that was a thing.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, just getting comfortable in your environment, that could be it. But it's also the what are you working for? Like that when you're in season training, you go hard in the gym because you know the big game's coming up this weekend and you're going to win that game. You win that game next week. Okay, we're on a bounce. You're not winning games. It's that constant rewarding feedback. I don't know what the proper terminology is, but say you're in off-season training, got a big off-season block during
Hmm.
the winter. There's no there's no rewardable factor coming in play. It's just you going week in, week
Yeah,
out to the gym. Next week, what we're doing? Oh, there's no big
yeah.
game to get amped for. There's no different environment you're being put in, whether that's mental environment or like a physical environment setting. No, it's just the same four walls, same scenario, maybe different
Yeah, it's a bit
sessions.
of a drag,
But do you know
isn't
what I
it?
mean? It's like,
Yeah,
okay, my weights are going up
yeah.
by
And if
two
yeah,
kilos, but I'm putting all this work in.
yeah,
Or do you know what I mean? So maybe it's that as well.
yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, and also like I don't know if they did it this. It's something that just thinking off the back of what you said. I don't know if they did it in this one. I don't think they did. Is actually measure like performance. Like what are they actually lifting in those sessions where they're saying they're not working as hard or harder? Um, a couple things that came to mind as well. Like when you're saying, yeah, you're right. Like we're testing him in a whole off season. What if and Kate kind of mentioned this last week as well of like I think perceived effort or perceived outcome from a session can be so dependent on how that session went. You know, like she was saying, some of her vaulters like have not the greatest session, and then they're really down on themselves and think this whole off season's been for nothing because of this one bad session. So like maybe as you're going through that wintering, like you said, you'd have no other than like the season coming up. You have no bigger kind of motivations, or not as big as like in season. You're training for whatever 3 months,
Mm.
4 months. You're tired. Maybe like you have fatigue, so maybe things aren't going as well in different areas of your training because you're tired, or even if they are going well, you don't feel as good doing them because you're exhausted. So, and then maybe you then rate yourself as like maybe not putting in as much effort because effort to you has always meant like more effort always means higher performances for you maybe. So like if you don't get that performance that you're looking for, effort's like, oh, I must have not tried hard or whatever.
Actually, you mentioned what Kate said about how one session might affect a person's self-efficacy in the past, and actually they raised a point where it said, in particular, previous researchers have found that a subject's past performance will be the direct cause of his or her future self-efficacy levels. However, in this
Right.
study, they found that it was
They didn't
yeah, they
find
didn't
it.
find it.
Like past
They didn't
performances
find that it
didn't
affected,
impact
yeah, future ones.
future self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, which goes.
But then but I feel like
I
this
don't know.
is difficult because it's
That seems strange though,
but
doesn't it?
but I don't know, because think about how complex the human brain is, right? Think about in the sense where it is this thing up in
Just deep
here
it. Just deep
is
it.
very crazy. But no, haven't you been through a crap session the day before and experienced this both ways? Next day you're like, oh, I can't be asked. Look, I don't want, like, coach just told me I'm not playing.
Mm.
I can't be asked. But then you have a day where the next day you're like, oh, you know what? I'm up for this. I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna make a change. But then another day, you're like, it's training,
Mm.
and there's nothing. I've experienced all of those different
Yeah.
types through whatever it is. So
Yeah.
that's why it's a bit like
You're right.
I I I do and I don't agree with both those studies, those conclusions that they've drawn, because sometimes I can see it affecting. It's just difficult. This is where sports psychology is so difficult, because you react to things differently to how I would react to things. We may align on some things,
Hmm.
but on a different day we wouldn't align on other those same things. Do you get me?
Yeah.
That's where it gets
Yeah. You're
difficult.
saying like one day, yeah, you're saying like I might have a terrible session, and because of whatever state I'm in, I'm like that fires me up for
Yeah,
tomorrow
yeah.
because I'm going to crush tomorrow. Or it might just, for whatever reason, because other stuff maybe isn't going as well in my life, I might be like, oh, and be super down. Yeah.
That's why
It's so,
it
it
is
is,
difficult. But
yeah,
it's an interesting paper,
yeah,
and
it's
it's good that
true.
they've gone out there and carried this research out because it is a stepping stone to understand. Because now we know, like they found that towards the end is where it's you need that initial research to then start drawing some theories or making theories or drawing conclusions from what they found. Because
Yeah.
for what our
Yeah.
hypothesis before going into this study, I thought, well, it could be at the start and it could be at the end. I wonder what they found, you know. So it is very interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah. I guess as well, like even the effort, even if it's like perceived effort, I guess that's important as well because that's a drag. So if we know perceived effort might be decreasing as we're going, like how as a scientist can I really start making sure that I'm, or like a S&C coach, or if I'm doing a session with an athlete, make sure that I'm really bringing the energy, like looking at ways that I can, even if they, even if say they think they're having a bad session or they had poor effort, like um, how can I feed back to them in a way that actually, if it was a good effort, be like, no, actually that was great,
mm,
you know, or then if it really wasn't, like how do we then support that athlete so that they feel good about their efforts,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. I had a really interesting one that comes to mind this past weekend, um, with an athlete and that I was giving like some physiology support to, and basically like we did it, we did the session, and after the session they felt like they didn't have a good session, like they came away from it and afterwards and reflected on a bit and actually felt like, oh, I'm actually pretty disappointed about how that went. I thought that I would have done better. um, and then so maybe they thought, like, oh, I didn't really try hard or I haven't been trying hard enough in training. And I really had a really good conversation with one of like the leads of the program, um, about like kind of how can I help to like feed back to that athlete of like actually of like how to feed back to that athlete in a positive way so that that session isn't a bad session.
mm,
And that doesn't mean that the last 3-4 weeks have been bad or the next 3-4 weeks ahead need to change, but actually like how do we educate and how do I support that athlete in that moment, and also like off the back of it to make sure that we're getting positive feedback so that we're because for me it was like that like his what I thought and what the athlete thought was like astoundingly
mm,
different. um but and so that was like this, I guess, like if we know that or perceived effort levels decrease, how can we support them to make sure that like that they're still feeling good about their training, especially towards the end, because like then we're starting to come into season and we want them feeling good as they're kind of putting the last few weeks of the building blocks going into a season. Like you don't want to be feeling terrible going into that,
mm.
right?
And I mean, bringing it back to the paper, one thing they said as a practical application is that coaches should structure the environment to allow for mastery experiences, which was one of the self-efficacy points. Um, yeah. Oh, no. Um, I thought you said something. Your mouth was like open, and I was like, yeah. So that's one of their practical applications, and I guess what this paper can say is that don't let it become stagnant. Depending, because every athlete's going to have an up and down sort of day. And
Hmm.
what they found is that at the end of this, they didn't find that self-efficacy had a play on the next session that was coming up. So using their
Hmm.
findings, you can say, well, hopefully there's not going to be that much of an influence on the next session that they're going to have. How do we help them master that skill, or master through experience that skill? Um, just keep it ever moving, like keep it in a way that it's not good. You're growing to that next step to learn that new skill. So say if by the end you want them to do clean and jerk, or a clean, you want them to do a 2000 kg clean. All right, well, you're not just going to do cleans for 4 months, or however long your off-season period is. You'll split it up. They use this example there. You'll split it up into a high hang clean, or like a clean pull, and then you're going to work to where a point where you can master that skill and bring it all towards the end to get that goal. So at least they know they're hitting different
Yeah.
parts, and then they're bringing it all in. It's a difficult, yeah, that winter month is difficult because this hasn't even spoken about it's just an off season. It's just that time where you're recuperating. There's so many different factors that can affect it, but yeah, that's one of the things they put out in their practical applications.
Yeah. I guess it's like just really, this one just kind of, I guess, opened my eyes of like things that may be going on, which is one of the things that I think, well, why we wanted to do this series for me is one of the things I wanted to get out of it is like, how can I support athletes better in this kind of season? And I think a big part of that for me is like understanding or being aware of some of the problems that might come up. And one of them is like, if athletes, like you said, is tired and exhausted, and so they are perceiving their efforts as poor,
Yeah.
and because of that they're maybe a bit frustrated, or like, oh, why am I not doing well? And actually it's because of X, Y, and Z, like fatigue or whatever, like we did this test on a different day or in a different environment, and or like there's just error or whatever, like, but obviously they're coming at it, they're too close to it, obviously, because they're so emotionally invested because it's their training.
Mm.
And then how do we, I guess, like one of them is, or the two that I thought were interesting, of like this 4 sources of self-efficacy is the being told by a significant other, right? So for me, it's like me as being the significant other, as like there's a part of their support team. So then for me, it's like important. Okay, how do I build a relationship with this athlete that that's strong, and so that I can kind of speak into that environment. And if I'm not, because like obviously, or at least I guess like for you, I guess as a S&C coach in a rugby team, you're around kind of the same athletes. Where for me, some of the athletes that I work with, I'm like, I see them every week. But sometimes if it's like a camp, then athletes who are based not in Loughborough, I just see them on that camp, and I might see them once a year or twice a year. So in that case, it's like, okay, well, they don't really know me. Maybe over the years they will, but in this moment they don't really know me. So, I'm not in that level that I could speak as impactfully into that situation. So in that case, it's like, how do I talk to people who are in the support team, who are maybe coaches or other physiologists, who could maybe then like basically relay that information to them? I think is really interesting. And then also the physiological states, or interpreting the body's physiological reactions as either positive or negative. And I think for me, especially in physiology, that would come back to, how am I educating the athletes in the short time that I'm seeing them? How can I bring across like what this means? Because I think athletes, and some athletes in particular, can be so focused on the numbers, and if they don't, they can kind of like zone in on this one number, that that number specifically wasn't as high or as low as they were hoping it to be. But for me, it's like, well, actually, if we take a step back and look at the whole test, or all the numbers together, actually you're in a really good spot, and this is exactly what we would imagine it to be. You know what I mean? So it's like, again, how can I educate the athletes, or coaches or whatever, to um again, like, I guess, bring uh to get that feedback, or give that feedback in the most impactful and positive way possible. I think this paper just like opened my
Mm.
eyes to that, and thinking about what we talked about with Kate last week as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. Um, yeah, no, it was a good it was a good paper, and it made me ask questions on like how important is like an off-season period or like a little break. And as you said to the beginning, going back to the beginning of this podcast, it made me look at some other papers. And one paper I found that's just like a little bite size, a little snippet of research is one that said that so elite football teams that do not have a winter break lose on average 303 player days more per season to injuries than those teams that do. So it's 35 a comparison of 35 professional European teams over 2010 2011 season to 2016 to 2017. So a total of 155 team seasons essentially through like the teams they've done, right? And
Yeah.
what they found is, so these are the results. Let me read them to you. This doesn't look mental at all. Okay, so 9,660 injuries were reported during 1,447,011 exposure hours. English teams that had no winter
Jeez.
break scheduled in the season calendar. The other European teams had a mean winter break scheduled for 10 days, so on average it was 10 days. Teams without a winter break
Mm.
lost on average 303 days more per season due to injuries than teams with a winter break during the whole season. So essentially, what was found was that teams without a winter break also had a higher incidence of severe injuries than teams with a winter break during the whole season. So we're looking at 2.1 severe injuries more per season for teams without a winter break. And another paper found that shortening of the winter break from 6.5 to 3.5 weeks was not associated with a change in the overall injury risk in the two top male football leagues. So showing like if it's 6 weeks or if it's 3 weeks, there's not much of a difference there, but it shows that still something
That's so
is
interesting.
something. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it was quite interesting to see.
So 3 weeks is better than 0 weeks, but 6 weeks isn't better than
3 weeks,
three
yeah.
weeks.
So and I wonder that goes into actually too long of rest could actually be detrimental because you're getting to a point where what are you doing in that rest? Are you doing nothing? Because if you're doing nothing, then your body's
Right.
ramping itself back up again for another big in season. You want a short break to allow your body to recuperate, but you don't want a too long of a break before your body's
Yeah.
like going like, okay, we can relax now, and then you're going back in suddenly like, holy smokes, here we go, we're back up again, and then the injuries are
Yeah.
just
And also then you're cutting the time you have between like starting the off season
yeah,
training, well, winter training to like the start of the season because now you have 3 less weeks.
100%.
That's a balance.
And then
And I wonder if it just changes between like sports and between individuals, I'm
And
sure, as well.
one thing that was thought about was the climate. Obviously, Europe in winter is different from England during winter, but apparently, climatic region had no significant impact on the association between winter breaks and injury burden for any of the 4 periods studied. Last little stat: the mean injury burden was
That's interesting.
185.9 days for teams without a winter break and 127 for teams with a winter break. So it's not too drastic. Like it doesn't sound too drastic if you get what I mean. That's per
Mm.
thousand hours. But it doesn't sound too drastic, but it is quite drastic if you break it down. Like, what's that? 50 or so that 50 blah blah blah
Say that
something.
again. Say that again. So how? What were the numbers per 1,000 hours
So
for the two for with
185.9
and without?
days. That's for teams without a winter break, and then teams with a winter break
Yeah.
got 127 days lost.
So 57 days more without a break
But
per
so
1,000 hours.
essentially,
And is that per thou?
sorry.
And that's like per 1,000 hours for not per team, but like per player, right? It's per 1,000 hours of
So
training.
essentially, it's yeah.
So they would like say like a team had 20 players and they all
Mm,
trained 1 hour. That's 20
yeah.
hours of training.
So essentially,
Yeah.
1,300 days lost per season for teams without a winter break, and 888 days lost per season for teams with a winter break,
Right. Yeah.
which is
Yeah. So when you break it down into like per hours, it doesn't seem like a big
mm.
thing, but like the amount of
But in a
hours there
season,
are.
you're looking at
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
like what? That's nearly 500, 400 or so days for a whole season.
Yeah,
Obviously,
and that's
those
only
are
yeah,
obviously that's
that's only
bringing in
in one
teams, but
season.
yeah, that's ridiculous. Think about how many days you need
Yeah,
those athletes to be there for. So it is interesting to see how, because I mean I remember in rugby there's like Boxing Day games in football, so you're playing on the 26th.
yeah,
There's no break, whereas other teams you get a break, and it shows how important that off season or that break during winter is because of all the external stuff. You're
yeah,
looking at the climatic effect of it as well. Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's just
yeah,
it's just another thing to consider. But yeah, that's what the research says. Hey, hey.
yeah. It means like that. That means that every hour there's there's 0.05 more injuries in the one group. That's I just divided it by 1,000, so it's not that exciting. But 1,000 hours just sounds like a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
100%.
hearing that it's only 57 more, it's like that's not that many.
Yeah,
But then when you either like scale it up to a full like what is in a full season, because 1,000 hours just sounds like a lot. But like how many hours is in one season?
yeah,
A ton, right? Enough for there to be 300 different, like a different 300.
yeah.
So
That's hectic. It is
or you
hectic
just
for
bring
sure.
it down to 1 hour, which is then like I understand what 1 hour is. If
Mm,
someone told me 1,000 hours, I'd be like, I don't know what that is.
yeah, it's quite hectic. Eh?
Like I know what it, like I know what 1,000 is and I know what hours are, but I have no like I can't picture that. You know what I mean? It's like if someone says like $100 million, like what is that? I know it's a lot of money, but I
It's a
can't
couple of these
picture
bad
what that
boys.
looks like.
This is what it looks like, mate. A couple of these bad boys.
A couple fancy cars, yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
No, it's interesting, and I think yeah, for me again, it's just like how do you support athletes in this time, and then how does that change per athlete? And for me, it's just like being aware of things that might be happening, and how can I then like um, just influence those times, or how can I just be aware of things that might happen, and how can I help, or how can I like direct people who are more close to that athlete
yeah,
in the best way
and
possible.
and
So
it'll be definitely interesting with our upcoming guests because let's just say they're a bit of a different sort of athlete that we're normally used to,
yeah,
and it'll be
yeah.
interesting.
So it'd be good to get like just different experiences, um, different contexts, which would be really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
w-
nice.
sweet.
Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. No, no,
what?
all good, all good.
Go
No, no,
ahead.
no, 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 no. All good, all good, all good, all good. But yeah, thank you for listening to today, and yeah, we hope you learned a bit along with us, and we hope you look forward for next week's.
So you're about to fall asleep.
Huh? No, mate, no.
No, it was good.
It's
It was good. Yeah.
sorry, mate. Step count's gone crazy. Guess how many steps I've done?
How many steps you've done?
Yeah.
7,400.
Holy smokes, 7,833. Yeah, it's not good at all. I
No
knew
way.
as soon
What
as I
a
said it, I thought
guess.
he's either gonna be very kind to me and say a big number, or he's just gonna say what I've actually done. Yeah, that was very
Well,
good.
that's a phenomenal guess by
That's
me.
very good.
My goodness. Yeah. No, but we hope you enjoyed it. And again, like, go follow us on Instagram. Let us know what you think. We have an email as well, which I think we've gotten one email too, other than junk email, which we get all the time. But like, let us know what you think. Comment on our reels that we post because we'd love to know what you think. Have you gone through something similar? Uh, yeah, I would love to hear from you. Go follow us along, and if you have been following, we really appreciate it because I think you and I really enjoy doing it because for me it just like gets me into papers that I wouldn't usually
Mm.
read. But obviously, if we can build a little community of young sports scientists who are just trying to learn a little bit, that'd be amazing. And yeah, hopefully we can just kind of help each other along as we grow and gain new experiences. So yeah, let us know. Matt, do you have
Yee-hoo.
anything that you want to add to that?
No, I love everyone and all you lot that listen over. Love you.
Matt loves everyone. And on that note, Matt, take us
This
out.
has been the RSS podcast. We're out.